There was a whole introduction about PDF. I'm going to take things a little bit further, and we're going to talk about PDF-A here. But before I do that, let me give you a little background of where I come from. You'll actually see that most of this has nothing to do with archival at all. My background really is in print and publishing. That's where I spent most of my time in. I have spent lots of time dealing with PDF since 1996. I actually wrote the first, I think, PDF editor in 1996 that worked as a plugin inside of Adobe Acrobat, which was a lot of fun to do. I've also been part of some of these meetings that you saw a picture of in the other room on ISO, and even before PDF went to ISO and became an ISO standard, some of the CGATS meetings here in the US. And in Europe, I come from Belgium, we have a whole list of, am I not loud enough? I'd be surprised. We have a whole list of different small countries, and everyone thinks that they're doing the best thing they probably can. So I've been involved with some standardization inside that, that arena as well, trying to help each country do something sensible and then trying to, well, make them all do the same sensible thing, which is a little bit of a challenge sometimes. I have this line about physics at the top. I usually don't mention that anymore. I've never done anything with it, but it'll come back in this presentation, so I've put it in. You'll see where it comes back. So what are we talking about? We're talking about archival, and once upon a time it was very easy. You selected a slab of stone and you put some stuff in there, and some of them actually survived pretty long. So that's easy, but that's not what we're going to talk about. What we want to talk about is something smarter, and in our age that means digital archiving. Now there's a whole range of subjects that are very, very interesting. My personal favorite is still data rot, I think, that is on there somewhere. Really fascinating. But the only thing we're going to talk about today is digital archival using PDF, and you'll see that it's a broad enough topic as it is. It has its challenges. So what's the problem? Well, here's the physics bit again. About 20 years ago, I had to write a thesis, a document. And the title of that thing, well, you can read it there. It's using MLCFA for decomposition of energy widening spectra of positron annihilation events. That sounds really science fiction-ish, doesn't it? The important part is that I don't have it anymore, actually. I used to have a paper copy somewhere. I don't find that again. And I used to have all kinds of electronic files that I saved somewhere. I still have those in a backup. I just can't open them anymore, let alone that they look the same. I simply can't open them anymore. I was a geek already at that point, so I had pretty decent software and hardware that I used, including things like WordPerfect on MS-DOS, which was really cool to edit documents in. And I saved them on floppy disks and iOmega zip disks, which was, again, really cool. Little purple, bluish device that could store a whole lot of data. I don't remember how much, but it's ridiculous if you look at it now. The point is, those electronic files that I still have don't open in anything that I own in terms of software today, so that's a shame. And neither the floppy disks nor those zip disks still insert in something that I can connect to a computer. So it's a little bit of an issue. And the problem is that this is only 20 years ago. And we don't think that 20 years is a lot of time. Now, I gathered some stuff that didn't exist in 1994 or that was invented at that point. If you remember Donkey Kong, that came out in 1994. But actually also Justin Bieber was born in 1994, so it was the beginning of the end, if you want. I do like just, no. But we didn't have internet. Well, internet actually existed. There was Mosaic from Netscape, that 0.9 version that came out and that I actually used at university. But we didn't have Facebook and all these other acronyms that use the internet. So even though it's only 20 years, the technology that we're using, both on the hardware side and on the software side, has changed dramatically. Just think of a cell phone. They did have cell phones. They were about this big. They did last a couple of weeks in terms of battery life, so but that changed quite a bit. And we don't always appreciate how quickly that changes. And that means if you're thinking about archiving something digital, you have to be really, really aware that what you do today still has to be available 20 years from now, or 50 or 100 years from now. So what's the solution? Well, you want a file format, and I wrote a long list of requirements here. They're actually kind of important. It needs to be a file format that is self-contained. When you're archiving something, it's always nice to archive something in one piece and not have other pieces linked to or scattered around to keep track of. You want something that is compatible with different operating systems. I'm doing this from a Mac. You have people that are using Windows, you have Linux and Unix and many, many, many different versions of all of those. You want something global that works worldwide. And with that I mean that if I'm in Belgium, I should be able to make documents in Dutch. If I'm in Japan or China, I should be able to make documents using the font that they use there. So it needs to be globally available. We're talking about archival, so it would be helpful if it would be compact, as small as possible, without losing any data. It should not be under control of any one particular vendor. Now you can wonder whether that's actually correct and whether that's a real requirement. But vendors are commercial operations, and if you have one vendor that has control over a file format, there is nothing that actually stops them from discontinuing something tomorrow just because they think it's a good idea. If you doubt that, look at Microsoft, for example, and Word and compatibility in that world, and it's not always that easy. So it shouldn't be under control of one vendor, and it should exist for a long time. And like I said, those two kind of go together sometimes. And it should be well-behaved, and that's a difficult one. Well-behaved means that if I make a PDF and I do more or less the right thing, and I give the PDF to one of you, and you do more or less the right thing, then it should look the same. It should work. That's not the case with all file formats. Again, think back to Microsoft Word. If I print something or make something on my computer, I have a specific printer, and I give it to someone else, they have a different printer. Many versions of Word had problems already with that scenario. So that's not really all that well behaved. So we're looking for something that obeys all of these rules that we set forward. And as Leonard and Duff were saying in the previous session, there is actually a solution. Adobe invented something quite a while ago, in 1993, that is called PDF. And while it originally was made for electronic documentation and use on the internet, the file format is actually very good for many of the points that I raised. It's self-contained. If you have a PDF file and it uses fonts or images or color profiles or something else, then it can be in the file itself. So a PDF file can contain all the elements that it needs. It's also compact, or it can be compact. You can use compression, both lossless compression or lossy compression, like JPEG and zip compression and all of those things. It's very compatible. I made this in Belgium. I sent it here. It's displayed on a different computer using a different version of Acrobat. It still works. It's global. We all know that PDF can support Unicode, as it's called, which encompasses all fonts available in the world today and many others. But then, is it vendor independent? Well, Leonard already gave the answer away if you want. It wasn't in the beginning because it was invented by Adobe, of course, and that meant it was under control of Adobe. And that also casted some doubt on the will it exist for a long time question. And then the last question, is it well behaved? Something to come back to as well. So on some of these questions, the Adobe PDF file format scores very highly. On others, there are still some questions. But as you already saw, PDF was adopted by the ISO, and it was adopted more specifically as ISO standard 32000-1 2008. And because of the fact that it was standardized, that means that it's now no longer under control of a single vendor. So that question can be stricken off. And because the ISO committee went a step further and also developed a PDF-A standard based on PDF, ISO 19005 rather, that means that the long-term archivability, or the fact that it will remain for a long time, can be answered positively as well. That standard that you see there, the official name is Electronic Document File Format for Long-Term Preservation. And officially, long-term is identified or as 50 years. That's kind of the what they shoot for. Now, if you talk to people, how long you want to save documents actually changes or differs widely. You have uses where it's 7 or 11 years for certain tax documents, for example. You have uses where it's 50 years, or it's as long as a building or a bridge exists, if we're talking about drawings of an architectural nature, for example, or an engineering nature. Or it can be forever. If you talk to libraries, they often take in digital documents and they simply want to have them available forever. That's a pretty long time. And PDF-A tries to be a standard that allows documents to exist for that long. And how is that possible? Well, it comes back to the well-behaved question. PDF files can be good. That means if I have a document and I convert it to PDF and I know what I'm doing and I use the right software and I control the whole process correctly, then my PDF file can actually be very, very good, and you will not have problems with it now or 50 years from now. But they don't have to be good. I can just as easily make a PDF file that fails even if I simply send it to one of you today, because it doesn't have the fonts that are needed embedded in there, or because there are other things that simply aren't suitable for long-term archival. PDF-A files have to be good. The purpose of the PDF-A standard is to restrict what you can do in a PDF and put some other additional requirements in place so that if you have a PDF-A file, you're actually certain it's a good document. And that's the drawing that you see at the bottom there as well. You have PDF, the whole universe of different things you can do with PDF. And then you have a restriction of what you can do in PDF, and that's really the universe of the PDF-A files. So a PDF-A file by definition is much better behaved than a PDF file. Okay, so why? Well, like I said, there are restrictions and there are additional requirements. Restrictions such as the fact that the fonts have to be in the document. Restrictions in the sense that a whole list of features cannot be used. PDF allows to use JavaScript in a file. That's not always a good idea for a whole variety of reasons. Well, PDF-A does not allow JavaScript to be used. So a number of features that can be very useful are simply not allowed when you're talking about PDF-A. And there are some additional requirements, such as the use of metadata, for example, to identify what a document is, and rules about how you can put metadata in a PDF-A file. Now, that would be the end of my presentation if there was only one version of PDF-A. Unfortunately, there are multiple versions. And it's understandable in a sense if you want. There are multiple versions of archives. Different people have different needs. And technology evolves over time. So it's easy to understand that just having one PDF-A standard is not going to cover everything. When you talk about PDF-A, there are two important concepts. There is the concept of a part of the standard, and that's what you see at the top there, PDF A1, A2, A3. And those typically are connected to an advance in the technology of PDF and technology in general. They answer to newer versions of the technology. And then at the bottom, you see something called A, B, and U at the end. And I call those flavors. I'm actually not certain if there is an official term for it. But each of these parts that you see at the top exists in different flavors. And those two things, part and flavor, are very, very important when you start to think about archival, because they will determine what you can do with the documents in your archive. They will also determine how difficult it is to make the archive. So from a business point of view, deciding which way you want to go is crucial in that sense. So you have to understand what those things mean. Well, let's start with flavors. Like I said, different archives require different things. And so when PDF A1 was created by the ISO, when the specification was written, they came up with two flavors, PDF A1B. It's difficult to pronounce, let me tell you, and that's part of the confusion. So you have the B flavor and you have the A flavor. The B flavor is the basic one. Just think of it like that. That means that you're interested in visual reproduction. If I have a document today, I want to be able to print it, and it has to look exactly the same 50 years from now. That's the B flavor. The A flavor, think of advanced. It's the easiest way to explain and remember. Does everything of the basic flavor, so all the same requirements, but it also focuses on meaning of the document. I'm not just interested in being able to print that same thing 50 years from now. I want to still remember what is in there. I want to be able to extract the text out of it, or the images. I want to be able to get meaning out of what I put in the archive. Another way to look at it, PDF A1B, visual reproduction. I'm not interested in anything other than being able to reproduce this 50 years from now, and it has to look the same. I have to have the same picture, the same text in there, has to look the same, that's all. If you have the A flavor, I'm also interested in meaning, and what that means is that text, for example, has to be in there in a very specific way. And the reason for that is that I want to be able to do copy and paste, for example. I want to take a PDF file, select something, copy and paste it into a Word document, and it has to be correct. Now, if you try that with PDF documents in general, it might work, but it's not going to work all the time, because not all PDF files are created with this mapping to Unicode, as it's technically referred to. So in a PDF A1A file, this has to be there. What also has to be there is document structure. If I have a document in the archive, I want to be able to identify that that first thing that I have there is actually a document title, and that these other things are paragraphs. Now, we're all used to that. If you have a Word document, Word knows what a paragraph is, so that should be easy. Except that PDF was never made for that, and it doesn't know what a paragraph is. It doesn't even know what a line is or what a word is. All it knows is that there are some characters on some text somewhere on the document, and that's it. So if you want to have structure from a PDF file, you have to put it in there. And it has to support tagging, and tagging means that elements like images are tagged with meaning. And for that one, for example, even though it's easy to recognize the Eiffel Tower, at least today, it might not be easy 300 years from now. We don't know what might happen to it. It's easy to recognize this as the Eiffel Tower. It's much more difficult to recognize this picture as exactly what it is. And this one happens to be taken at a very specific moment when World War II was over, and it's an American Jeep that is in front of there. That kind of meaning, if you don't put it in your document and in the archive, you will not be able to extract that 50 years from now. And in some archives, this kind of meaning is crucial. So If one contains more than the other and it makes the archive more valuable, then it's easy. We always use the A flavor and be done with it. Except that, of course, the A flavor is much more difficult to create than the B flavor. It's also much more difficult to check. How do you make software that automatically checks that this is a picture of the Eiffel Tower taken after World War II with an American Jeep in front of it? That's very difficult. That's a human that needs to verify that. So going to PDF A1A makes your archive much more valuable, but it also increases the amount of work you have to do to put documents in the archive. It makes it so that you cannot rely solely on automatic processes, but probably you also have to include humans in a process to input the information in there. In practice, it means that your source documents that you start from to make PDF-A need to be good and contain most of that information, and you have to make sure that it's preserved as you put it in PDF-A. Right? So that's PDF-A1, and you see that I cheated a little bit down there. I only talked about the A and the B flavor. Well, for PDF-A1, there is only an A and a B flavor, so that's easy. After PDF-A1, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about the rest, it gets easier as you go along, that's good. I won't go into too much detail because there are other sessions that cover some of this content as well, but there have been other parts of the PDF-A standard. You have PDF-A2, and like I said, those parts have to do with advancements in technology. And with new versions of PDF came a new version of PDF-A so that it adopts those new capabilities. And you see a list there of the kind of things that are allowed in PDF-A2. The one thing to single out of that is that a PDF-A2 file is capable of storing other files in itself. So if I have an email with an attachment, I can convert the attachment into PDF-A and put it into the main PDF-A file that I'm archiving, which makes it very powerful to archive connected information together. Which one do you use? Depends on the archive you have and what features you want to be able to support. And then it gets even more complicated if you look at flavors. There is an A and a B, just as we had before, but PDF-A2 actually also has a U flavor or a Unicode flavor. And the purpose of that is to make sure that you have something in between the very difficult to create and the very easy to create. A1 and A2 weren't enough. They also had a PDF-A3, but that one is really, really simple. The only difference that you have in there, and it's a contested change if you want, is that in an archive, I can now also store arbitrary documents. So I can actually have an archive where I have PDF-A files, but where the PDF-A file contains a PowerPoint or an XML or an Excel sheet. And true, you might not be able to open that PowerPoint 50 years from now, but you can put it in there in case you can. If you can still open it, you have all the information just as it was 50 years before. If you can't, then you can store a copy of it as a PDF-A file in there as well. So you have the best of both worlds if you want. That's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you very much. If there are any questions. Yes?
So normally A comes before B. So what's the real order?
Yes, as I always say, the naming convention is probably one of the reasons it's so confusing. And you have to remember it as B from basic and A from advanced, and then it's easy to remember. The annoying part is that's PDF-A1A and PDF-A1B, and it gets hard to pronounce, and you mix them up yourself if you're trying to explain it. But so nothing to do with alphabet, just functionality in there.
And that's actually why we picked them, so it'd be easier to remember.
Yes, good job.
So are archival agencies in various jurisdictions mandating one or the other of these combinations of flavors? Or are they open to accepting any combination of whatever? Or?
Yes and no. It depends on the organization that you're talking to. It depends on the country you're talking about. It's always the same thing. If you have to choose between storing a Word file or a PDF, I would go for a PDF. If you have to choose between PDF or PDFA, I would go for PDFA, right? Reliability improves as you go along. If you have to choose between PDF A1, PDF A2, PDF A3, you have to look at the feature set that is supported by each of these parts and see what you need. But as long as you have PDF A, you're already doing a good job. And as long as you're creating PDF A, you know that you're using a standard that is going to survive forever. It's not because PDF A2 comes out that the other parts of the standard all of a sudden are not valid anymore. They will continue to exist. So if you have an archive and you put PDF A1 in there because that's easy to create for you, or because historically that was the right thing to do, you're doing a good job, and your archive is going to remain valid forever.